BRAINIAC podcast. This is episode 2. We're very excited to be continuing the podcast, and this month we have Nicola Bijvoet as our guest. Welcome, Nicola.
Hi, Edina. Thank you for having me.
So, for those who don't know, Nicola's actually my sister, so it's close to home this month. But Nicola has a history with concussions as well, and some interesting experiences to offer. So I thought she would be a great guest for this podcast. So when did you sustain your concussion?
So I sustained my concussion this April. So it's been a couple months. I was actually in quarantine at the time, as everyone was. So that was something that I definitely felt changed my experience, because I had to deal with the medical system when everything was in lockdown. So that was definitely something that was interesting. And additionally, I actually sustained it just at home. So it wasn't even something like during a sport, like what you normally hear, hockey, football, things like that. No, I just hit my head at home. So,
and I think that's a really good point to make, because concussions have that very athletic, sport-oriented reputation. But on the other hand, you can get concussed at home or just out and about just as easily. And so it's a good thing that you realized you had a concussion. And when approximately was it that you decided, like, hey, something's up?
Yeah, so actually that was one of the other things. I actually didn't really start to think that something was wrong until about a week later. So partially because I just hit my head at home, I was not really thinking that it could be something serious. But in the days following my injury, I woke up with a headache consistently throughout the entire week, and I'm not prone to headaches, or at least I wasn't pre-concussion. And so I would be like, oh, I've woken up with a headache again. This is kind of strange for me, but I was just kept putting it off, being like, oh, it's raining. You never know. Like, I didn't really think anything of it at the time until about a week later, when my symptoms were progressing more and more. I was becoming very sensitive to screens and light and sound and things like that. And I was trying to do a reading for school, and I just couldn't finish it. And at that point, I thought I should really look into it, see if something was going on. But that's, of course, scary, because the first week is a crucial time. So I think that I definitely did worsen the injury by waiting before really taking it seriously.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate that you had that experience with that week delay in realizing that you were concussed. For those that listened to our first episode with Joseph, he also had like a delayed response time after becoming concussed, which caused negative repercussions in the long run. And so you think that probably worsened the condition then?
Yeah, I would say it's very likely that may have even taken it from a very mild injury to something a little bit more serious.
Yeah,
for sure.
And for those that don't know, there is kind of like a golden week that people talk about, that you kind of need to get into action as soon as possible with concussions. And of course, you can still heal after that time, but it is those first few days that are really important, that you kickstart that recovery plan as soon as possible. And so you said some of your symptoms that you had were headaches, sensitivity to light. What else?
Yeah, headaches for sure, specifically brought on often by screens and light and things like that. I do sometimes also, and specifically in the beginning, I would normally have them just constant all the time. I would wake up with them and they wouldn't go away. But as I started to recover, it was more, the onset would be things like screens or lights or noises. Yeah, things like that. I also did have several problems visually. I would have like dizziness and floaters as well. So that was another thing that I experienced, as well as just general loss of balance and several other things.
Yeah, and something that I know as Nicola is my sister, is she's very active. She likes to be out and about. She's really not the type of person that wants to spend like her whole day indoors or on the couch and everything. So I remember that that first time of recovery was really difficult for you, because you were even though research has shown that having some movement is actually good for concussion recovery, but to a certain extent you did kind of have to be indoors, taking it really easy, and I remember that was hard for you, right?
Yeah, that was definitely hard for me. I really like to go outside, like to go for walks and also to the gym, and that's something that I was not able to do for a long time, specifically any lifting weights, anything high like cardio, I really was not able to do for quite some time, and that was difficult for me for sure. Eventually during the recovery process, I did start to phase in just like short walks outside. But even that, of course, it's very different from what I was used to. So that was definitely a shift for me.
Yeah, and doing concussion presentations with the Concussion Legacy Foundation as well, we notice that a lot, that people who are very athletic and very active people, when they become concussed, the recovery is just that much more difficult for them because they have to abstain from all the things that they enjoy doing, basically. And that it's kind of like a toxic cycle, because if they're unhappy, it can also aggravate symptoms, or it just causes more distress. So it's really important that people realize you can go for light walks and everything during your concussion recovery. In fact, research has shown that it can actually help your recovery. So that's important to remember. But and then so you said that your recovery went better, and then at some point it became aggravated again by school, right?
Yeah, so throughout the summer, I worked hard on my recovery. I was also working with a physiotherapist that was certified by Complete Concussion Management, and that was something that I felt worked very well for me. And towards the end of the summer, I was under the impression that I would be good going into the school year. But a couple weeks into the school year, I felt my symptoms starting to return, most likely because of the amount of screen time we have, not it like in general, but especially now that we're in online school, it's been quite heavy. So that, along with just readings and just the amount of load that comes with, definitely I felt that hit me pretty hard. So that's something I wasn't expecting. But yeah, so I guess it does come in waves in certain times, because I did feel before the school year that I was doing very, very well. And yeah.
Yeah, no, and then it really is too bad that this is kind of bad timing to have a concussion because of the pandemic. Because, I mean, you have to spend so much time doing everything virtually. And even for those in school, perhaps you have the same experience here at U of T. A lot of what we used to maybe do in textbooks and physical textbooks have just been issued to us online now. So we're doing a lot more online reading. All our in-person meetings with professors or other students, they're all online. So if the screen is a trigger for concussion symptoms, that can be really difficult for students. And so one of the main reasons that I really wanted to have Nicola on the podcast today is because she is actually maintaining a special diet with the hopes that will help and aid her concussion recovery. And I find this a really interesting topic because it's not something that is very well researched. I was actually looking on PubMed and other research databases earlier today to see if I could find more information about it. And there really is very little studies. The majority of the studies that have been done on this have been on mice, so not super relatable to humans. But it has worked fairly well for you, right?
Yeah, I felt that the concussion diet was very good. That I've definitely felt like that it had a good effect on my recovery. For sure, I'm still maintaining it. So basically, what it is an anti-inflammatory diet. I guess you could also call it that. So it basically cuts out anything like refined sugars or anything that could cause inflammation. So it's also dairy-free, vegan, essentially, just plant-based. And yeah, so it essentially, the goal is to reduce inflammation, which hopefully would also translate to the concussion and the brain.
That's that's amazing. And again, disclaimer to listeners, we are not medical professionals. So if you are concussed and you want to try this, please consult your family doctor or another health professional. But I've seen firsthand living with Nikki or living with Nicola is that it has worked fairly well for her. So it is a pretty strict diet for potentially the average person. So Nikki, do you want to talk about some of like what maybe would be in your daily food intake, what type of foods you actively avoid, and what type of foods you eat very often?
Sure, sure. So, I was actually vegetarian even before taking up this diet, so it was less of a shift for me than it maybe would be for some other people. But I did cut out all dairy and eggs as well, so I'm now essentially vegan. Um, so on top of that, I also don't really eat like I don't I stay away from like white bread and things like that, as well as sugars. Like I eat a lot of fruit and things like that, but I don't eat any artificial sugars. So there's that. And then so in general what I eat is just a lot of fruit, a lot of vegetables, like oats, and I do eat some bread, but mostly like sprouted whole grains and just nothing that's very refined or processed. So yeah.
And then healthy fats like
Yeah, for
avocados,
sure.
flax seeds, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I mean, certainly if it doesn't help your concussion, will offer a lot of other health benefits as well. So that's fantastic. And like I was saying, so the research is definitely scarce. But as I look through the relevant research, there is definitely some evidence that it can definitely reduce inflammation in the brain. Again, a lot of the research is on mice, but still really interesting that the nutrient-rich diets can reduce disease and concussion progression. We're also seeing from organizations like Concussion Alliance that they are recommending a similar diet to what Nicola is following. So definitely, if you're suffering from a concussion, maybe look into it. If it's nice that it's just something you can do at home, right? You have so much autonomy with your diet. You can eat whatever you want. So it's not something that a therapy that you would need to go to a health professional for, at least not for upkeep, maybe initially to get advice. And so another thing that we're seeing is hydration is recommended. So is that something that you've been working into your daily life as well?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely make an effort to get at least 2 liters of water every day. More as a bonus. So I definitely find that that's something that helps. Of course, yeah. And I've also actually had to reduce my coffee intake with my concussion, which is one thing I wasn't too happy about, but that I definitely feel has actually been helpful as well. So yeah.
Yeah, for anybody that knows our family, we are very heavy coffee drinkers, so that is definitely a con to the diet. But yeah, so I'm so happy that it is helping you,
Yeah, for sure.
and that's absolutely fantastic. And so tell us a little bit about some of the symptoms that were brought back on at the start of the school year. So again, to summarize, Nicola has followed this diet for multiple months now, and she had massive recovery during the summer. She was feeling a lot better. But then the start of the school year in September at the University of Toronto for us, we both go to the University of Toronto, kind of aggravated a lot of her symptoms. So which symptoms came back, and which ones are you still symptom free on?
Yeah, so the main one that I would say came back is just the headaches. Specifically also brought on by long periods on screens, long periods reading like small text or something like that. That's the main thing that I felt really came back for me, which makes sense, I guess, because of course that is something that increased a lot with the start of the school year. Prior to the school year as well, I was limiting my screen time a lot. I was doing everything I could to not be on screens as much as possible because I knew it was a trigger. But then coming into the school year, I guess I just really was not accustomed to it at all. So it really, that did hit me quite hard. So the headaches was the main thing. And on top of that, the visuals is something that I still have had an issue with. I've had floaters from time to time come back. I did have that quite a bit in the beginning. and I've had that a bit now as well as just blurred or double vision if I have to be focusing on something on the screen for too long. So for me, the best thing to do has been to take frequent breaks, just to do everything kind of in short bits of time. But of course, there a challenge is staying on top of everything, because if I'm taking breaks and other people aren't, then of course I'm falling behind, right? So that's something that I feel has been a challenge for me, is to be able to find the balance between like not triggering my symptoms but still staying on top of everything. So yeah, that's been something that has definitely been a challenge for me.
And so, what about the support? Do you feel that people have been very understanding and supportive? Like, this is the same question that I asked Joseph in the last episode, because we know, unfortunately, that a lot of people don't have the respect for concussions that they should. And given that it's an invisible disability and an invisible injury, people don't really understand what a person who's concussed is going through. So, do you want to talk to that for a second?
Yeah, the experience I've had has varied a lot from person to person, based on who I've been in contact with. So back in April, I think I mentioned earlier, it was a bit difficult for me to get all of my administration sorted regarding my injury, because we were in lockdown. Like, everything was far more closed even than it is now with regard to COVID-19. So I was not able to see a doctor in person. I was not able to essentially see any medical professionals in person, because nothing was open. Like, no clinics were seeing patients. So basically everything that everyone that I spoke to in that sense was over the phone, which made it hard for the school to process my paperwork. So yeah, so I guess it depends in that sense. I had some people who were like, "How long do you expect this to take?" Like, exactly 2 weeks, like exactly 14 days after my injury, I got an email from someone in an office that said, "It's been 2 weeks. Like, are you better now?" And I was like, "No." But then I also had a lot of other people that were very supportive, people often who had experience themselves with concussions. Some of my professors, their kids had concussions before, and those were the people that were very, very helpful and just very patient and supportive and willing to accommodate me. Um, so yeah, I would say it's definitely been a little bit of both. Kind of anywhere on the spectrum, I've probably been in contact with someone. But I would say one thing is just that a lot of people don't really know what they're talking about when it comes to concussions, and I would say I probably didn't either before my own injury. So the most important thing, I think, is just education and understanding what it really is and what the implications really are.
That is such a good point. And yeah, that's an interesting thing you mentioned about the email, because I mean, you can't just put it like a timestamp on a concussion. It's really not like a doctor can tell you like, "Oh, don't worry, you'll be fine by this date." It's the exact opposite. It's so variant, so dependent on who you are, how hard the hit was, your history with concussions. As we know, that concussions, the more concussions you've had, it typically results in like worse symptoms or longer recoveries. And so, what did you have a concussion before this?
No, I've never had a concussion before this.
So that's good, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah, no, that
that's
is definitely
positive.
good. Yeah.
So that's amazing. And so, what do you plan on continuing this diet, or do you have like a certain time? Like, if you become asymptomatic at some point, is it something that you want to stop or continue?
I would say it could be loosened maybe. For sure I'm not saying that I'll maintain this for the rest of my life, but I have to say that I've really noticed the benefits both for my concussion and just in general in the way that I feel. I've really enjoyed the effects of this diet. So I mean, I definitely will continue to eat healthy. I did before as well, but even more so, I've just really felt a difference in my energy levels and things like that with this extremely like nutrient rich diet. So I would say that I plan to continue it but maybe more loosely going forward.
100%, and we're so happy that it served you so well. And for listeners, do your own research, talk to your medical professional. Again, there isn't a lot of research, but there is some research to show that an anti-inflammatory diet can have positive effects on concussion recovery. So it's really an exciting area of research. And I mean, you don't have a lot to lose because it can lead to other health benefits if it doesn't help your concussion. So definitely something to look into and something to keep an eye on. And with that, is there anything else that you want to tell listeners about, maybe with regard to taking it seriously immediately, or?
Yeah, the main thing I would say is to just, take yourself seriously. It doesn't matter how insignificant it may have felt, or how mundane. You never know. It's every hit could be different, and you could hit your head on the same couch you've hit your head on before, and you could get a concussion one time and not get a concussion the next time. And if you are feeling like something's off, you shouldn't dismiss that feeling, because a lot of the time it's for a reason. And that was the case with me, and I did dismiss it at first, and I have to say that I definitely think it worsened my injury.
That's a great message. Well, thank you so much for being on BRAINIAC, Nicola. We were super happy to have you. And thank you to all the listeners. Again, my name is Edina, and we're doing this podcast in affiliation with both Concussion Talk as well as the U of T chapter of the Concussion Legacy Foundation of Canada. And thank you again for listening, and always feel free to reach out. This program is sponsored by HeadCheck Health, who bridges the gap in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Trek Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. The music at the beginning of this podcast is by bensound.com.